Okay.
All right, we are live, people.
I mean, Andy's camera kind of looks like a casting couch.
He does have a casting couch behind him. That's true.
I mean, I have other ventures that I go into.
And he does look like a creepy producer.
Is
The
it
doorbell rings. My business prospect is here.
Got that like
doorbell?
Middle
Please,
East oil
I
money.
live in an apartment. I just got a little knocker. So click, click, click. All right, so I guess we're just going to get right into it. We are Casual Outlaws, and if you guys notice, we have an additional member today. Nate, if you'd like to introduce yourself, go ahead.
My name is Nate.
And that gives us a nice characterization of who Nate is.
I'm Nate. I am Faulkner's brother, little brother. I'm his younger brother. Younger, dumber, sexier.
See that?
I mean, when somebody's right, they're right.
Chris has no defense.
Nope. Sorry.
But thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So we should probably go ahead and preface everything by saying spoilers ahead.
Yeah, pretty much every episode is going to be a spoiler of some sort.
Well, I don't know if we wanted to slowly move into things, just give like a little bit of a little blurb about it and then move into spoiler territory. If we just want to just fucking go guns a-blazing right into it.
I think you should always lead with spoilers.
All right, spoilers.
In a lot of ways, the book Dune is a spoiler of itself.
Yeah.
Please explain.
Well, we're getting like the in-between parts of the book are sort of like history summations throughout different points of history. So we're getting an after-the-fact retelling of the events of our characters, which kind of presupposes like the known result. We aren't living these events in real time.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I get that. I mean, plus, we haven't really been introduced by this princess, whatever her damn name.
Princess Irulan.
Yeah, Princess Irulan.
But she's talking about like she knows everything, so I assume, yes, that she is at some point ahead of us.
It's like she has recorded all of the important sayings of Moebius.
She's our R2-D2. She's just telling us a story.
Well, like if R2-D2 wrote a book
and told a story
after the fact.
Have you guys not heard that theory about R2-D2 being like the storyteller of the entire Star Wars universe? Like he just never dies.
Yeah, but he doesn't actually tell the story.
Yeah, he's just in the story.
Yeah.
Oh, but remember,
never narrating.
R2-D2 never gets his memory wiped. He's the only.
That's
droid
fine, but we're never sitting with Fred Savage on a bed.
Tells the story.
Yeah,
because we haven't reached the end of that universe where he's telling the story. Or
we did. They said that this was supposed to be the last one of the Skywalker story.
Yeah, they're dead.
Yeah, but R2-D2 is not a Skywalker, so he can be around.
They're all gonna die.
All right, this is terrible.
We completely got off track there.
I apologize to everyone. That was awful.
It was great, and you know it.
So spoilers. That's the key point.
Yeah, spoilers.
Spoilers. Main character is basically a messiah.
Yeah, it's like trope.
Yeah.
So the overall plot is right. There's these groups. You have the
bad guys and the good guys.
Well, I guess the setting. It's a sci-fi setting, right? It takes place theoretically in the future.
I think you said something about it being like 10,000 years in the future or some shit.
No, it's like 20,000 years in the future.
Yeah. It's like it's 10,000 years since I think the Butlerian Jihad, which was like a post-Earth human thing where humans had invented AI basically, and people had to go through and fix AI existing.
They pretty much banned like sophisticated AI, right?
So basically, the whole Geth Quarian situation from Mass Effect.
Well, Geth Quar is from Dune. Let's think of it as what is the progenitor of a lot of our narratives
the other
here.
Way around.
Yeah.
I understand it's the other way around. I'm just using more recent media as a comparison for the audience and myself because I've consumed the more recent stuff than Dune.
Okay. But yeah, so I mean, that's sort of like the history is. So that's where you get like the Orange Catholic Bible as well as like the "Thou shalt not make computers in the mind of a human," I think was the quote from the early part of this book.
But they still use like sophisticated technologies to like enhance certain aspects, like the potions that the mentats would drink. Those were like solutions that were chemically compounded, right?
Well, I mean, they're just spice cocktails, basically.
It's
But yeah,
it's like taking Adderall.
No,
Yeah.
but like when you look at their technology in the ships, they're still using the shield generators on their belts and everything. So they still have
Mhm.
aspects of technology. So it's just sophisticated AI that they've
Yeah.
abolished, right?
yeah, you're not allowed to make computers in the mind of a human. So like
No sense.
we have probably trouble like identifying it because a lot of what we identify as our technology is handled through computers that do logic, like
Yeah.
process some kind of logic.
The
So like
machine learning
when you
and all
try and
that stuff.
imagine it, yeah. So a lot of our technology works that way. So when you try to imagine technology without sort of this built-in logic of a computer, it can get a little confusing there.
And I can't recall if this is mentioned, but are the mentats basically supposed to act as like their higher mathematics personnel?
Yeah, I mean
for,
they're
like,
basically human
Vulcans.
supercomputers.
yeah. So like,
They're
do
like
they like
Vulcans.
plot the jumps in the space and all that stuff, or the space guild?
Not the Mentats exactly. The people in the Space Guild do it. It
Well, I
becomes
imagine
a
that the
much
space guild
larger
probably has
subject
a lot
later
of
in the
mentats.
book. I don't
Okay.
necessarily want to spoil it for you.
I know that the spacing guild, like, they control like interstellar travel, but they're also like the banking guild.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the only people who are able to fly between different planetary
You
systems,
control the currency. If it is an
yeah, I
empire.
mean, you would be the one who would control the ledgers, like who would fly them around. So it would make sense that you'd be the bankers in that situation.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting about this character Paul is that so he's a mentat, but then he's also the Kwisatz Haderach.
Well, it's not. He doesn't just is the Quizart Satarak. They suspect him to
Yeah,
become
I
the
mean,
Quizart Satarak.
they suspect it, but I'm pretty much just going to go ahead and assume that he is.
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty much.
like it's just let's just get right to it. He pretty much is. So he's
I
like
so.
he's a Benny Gesserit, but he's also a freaking mentat. So he's like, the amalgam of them, and he's like super awesome because of it, I'm guessing.
Um, I wouldn't say that's the most correct way to think about it. Like they kind of explain it a little bit later in the book, but basically, um, what we see as sort of a theme throughout this book is going to be everybody in the Empire's reliance on spice itself,
Mhm.
and so it's the effects of the geriatric spice melange's ability to, and its effects on the human body that's gonna and like how this one thing essentially is completely tied to the fate of the galactic empire
Yeah.
that uh
Yeah,
these houses are attached to.
they touched very briefly on that right before our stopping point, where he's
Yep.
mentioning like, yeah, spice is like, yeah, it's the thing that's killing us, but it's also like the most important thing to us.
Yeah, so that's what Paul mentions is that he consumes it and makes him like powerful, right? But then he's
Mhm.
also a slave to it because he can't
Yeah.
live without it.
Like
He's
everyone's
addicted now.
addicted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that
And-
it's killing them per se, because
Well, didn't
it's
he mention
actually
that
a
it's
drug
basically
that.
didn't he kind of allude to the fact that it's kind of like a fatal addiction? Like if he stops, like he will die.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of addictions that work like that.
Yeah.
But the spice itself, what they mean when they say geriatric spice is that it treats like your age, like the aging of your body. So like it actually prolongs life for most people. So it actually so you live longer with the use of spice, but you just can't stop using it. And so
Otherwise, you
because
like significantly deteriorate right away.
I don't know if they ever get specifically into what the withdrawal systems are like, but like all of these groups that we're aware of use spice in some capacity. So if they didn't have access to it, their role that they serve in society would essentially vanish.
Does
So I guess it's good to mention that we're just in this podcast. We're just reviewing the first portion of the book,
correct?
pre
I mean,
Moadib.
like I guess we can kind of, if we have the time, or if like someone just mentions it because they like. I assumed that he was going to become this Kwisatz thing, and you just confirmed it, and that's obviously further from where we stopped. I mean,
We did
I'm
say
not,
spoilers.
yeah. So
Yeah. So I
mean,
guess maybe we should back up a little bit. So like where we're at with the book is that we've read up until this Moa Deep section. So the story so far is basically we're introduced to our character Paul. He is the son of the Duke Leto. The Duke
Atreides.
Leto. Yeah, he is a. This is a noble house, basically, if you want to think of it in like medieval terms, that have been tasked by their emperor to take over mining operations of the geriatric drug melange, also aka spice, on the desert planet Arrakis.
Also known as Dune.
Also known
Kicking
as
out the
Dune.
Harkonnens.
Yes. The Harkonnens
Fuck
have
those
been a longtime bane of our protagonist, Paul, and his father, Duke Leto. They are the people who were previously in charge of the spice production on Arrakis, aka Dune. And as we learned through sort of this beginning part of the series here, they have conspired with this emperor to sort of take down the Atreides house.
But like, what I don't understand is if this Atreides house is looked upon in a higher regard than the Harkonnen house, is that why the Emperor kind of wants to take them down? Like he's afraid of their influence, or does that ever get like explained?
They explain it a little bit later, yeah. But it isn't so much that they're better than the Harkonnens, therefore the Emperor favors the Harkonnens. Because the Harkonnens are essentially an upstart family. They're merchants who, I forget the name of the trading guild. The Chom.
Yeah, so the people who basically move all the spice, right?
Yeah, the Troma Syndicate. They have they're basically a mercantile organization, and they have these shares in spice that is this large commodity that's traded all throughout the Galactic Empire that has all these various uses.
So the Harkonnens have more of this trade control, I guess, than the Atreides, or
So
no?
when you say they're an upstart family, do you mean like they are not like an old family that kind of got started?
Yeah, they are
Okay.
merchants who bought a title.
Okay. So
essentially-
they're new money while the Atreides are old money.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact time frame of when they became new money per se. But that's sort of like the idea is like the Atreides are sort of a traditional royal bloodline, while the Harkonnens are newer players in this political field.
He did I think the Harkonnen guy, I can't remember what his freaking title was.
Baron
Baron,
Harkonnen.
yeah, the Baron
Yeah.
kept mentioning something about cousin with the Atreides. So they have some kind of crossing in the bloodline at some point in the past.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't remember this.
So when Duke Leto is captured and he's brought to that dining table and he's speaking with the Baron keeps referring to him as something cousin. I can't remember.
They're cousins with the Emperor.
Okay, so they do have some kind of blood ties.
Not the
Somewhat.
Harkonnens. The Atreides do.
Okay, but he wasn't speaking to the Emperor. He was speaking to the Baron. And he was calling him blood cousin.
I don't think he was calling him cousin. I think they were like conspiring, and they were talking about their role.
That was me. Oops.
Yeah, what happened there? You disconnected your webcam?
Yep, I hit a button with my pinky.
Fun times.
Yeah.
All right, no worries. So the Atreides and the Harkonnen are not blood related, but they are both somewhat related to the Emperor.
I mean, at the end of I don't think both are related to the Emperor. I think just the Atreides are related to the Emperor.
Okay. Well, I mean, spoilers, but at the end of where we stopped, we kind of find out, oh no, wait, they do have a blood relative cross there with our.
Well, Paul does through his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of in the middle of the summation, so let's go back. So the Atreides have been tasked with taking over the desert planet Dune. They're aware of this plot to sort of get fucked over by the Emperor and the Harkonnens. They're sworn enemies. we are introduced to various characters who the sort of theme here is that all of these people are loyal to the Atreides because they hate the Harkonnens. They all have some reason to hate them. Whereas we see the Harkonnens really as manipulators of people. They like to control addiction. They find their points of leverage.
Yeah.
So we have what we're going to call our protagonists as the Atreides house and our antagonists, the Harkonnens and the Emperor. And so most of where this sort of first section of the book is where we're at is the changeover in power, where the Harkonnens are supposed to be letting the Atreides sort of go through their whole thing. So we're watching the Atreides establish their foothold on this desert planet called Dune. Here we see more powers at play other than the Emperor, where we're introduced to the Fremen, as well as the residents of these like central fiefs on the planet itself, who aren't necessarily Fremen themselves. And we sort of get this this contrast between like the lush, vivid world where they were from, and this hostile, mostly all desert world Arrakis, and sort of how water plays into it.
Which is when you kind of started complaining about the still suits and the production stills for the new movie.
Thank you for derailing.
You are welcome.
About 3/4 of the way of what we've gone through so far, the events happen. We find out that the Dr. Yui, on the promise that he'll be able to at least stop his wife from suffering under Harkonnen control, has betrayed the Atreides house, but is still sort of loyal in a lot of respects in that he saved Paul and Jessica, and sort of gave them out into the desert, where that's where our story ends so far.
Yeah, so it feels like the parts that we read definitely feels like more of a like world building setup.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of world building.
Like there's so much information of like the different groups and how they interact and things of that sort.
I think that's sort of like an interesting part when we're first introduced to like the Baron Harkonnen. This whole section is essentially an exposition dump, but it's done in sort of like a plot-based way where we see the Baron talk to his mentat and his nephew.
His nephew.
Who
so far
Vane Ratha.
But he's so far not appeared again in the book at this point that we stopped.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he comes more into play into the next section.
Yeah.
That's
the third section.
Is it the third?
Well, yeah.
Really?
It seems like the next section is fairly short because where we stopped is basically like the halfway point in terms of length of the book. So it seems like the next two sections are much shorter.
We're going to do a time jump.
Yeah.
Time jump.
Yeah, so basically Paul is in the next section, Paul's going to hang out with the Fremen, get accustomed to their way of life, their goals, their ambitions for the future, and then it's going to skip, and Paul is going to get, there's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be a reckoning for what the Harkonnens and the Emperor have done to Paul.
Gotcha. And it like based off like what we've read so far, like I'm getting kind of the impression that like the Fremen really actually control the spice and they have a lot more knowledge about how the sandworms work and all that stuff on that planet. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, they're like the masters of the whole sandworm.
Well, yeah, they're from that planet, so they're going to have that deeper knowledge.
Yeah, but like it seems like
Arrakis
seems like there's going to be like a whole kind of like, yeah, we've kind of been really secret about this, but like, yeah, no, the sandworms, they're our bitches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst way to think about it. I wouldn't say that they're...
so that is an accurate guess.
I wouldn't say
it's fairly close.
The right word.
They're codependent, or they work together.
Well, they're not really even codependent because, I mean, at the end of the day, the sandworm's still a big-ass sandworm.
I mean, that's
they
true.
just kind of use the worms to their advantage, especially in terms of trekking the desert, for many miles.
Kind of like
Yeah,
when we
I mean-
domesticated horses.
Yeah.
I
You got a
mean, they
horse?
worship it. They worship
I got
it
a
like
big
a
old
god.
worm.
They worship it like a god. They call it Shai Hulud, and they view it as sort of like a great destructor of their world.
Well, I mean, from what it seems like they're extremely destructive. So that's probably a fair bet on their
And
part.
they respect it. They have a
Yeah.
high respect for it.
I think
I mean,
it's
like-
not 100% correct to say that they are fully in charge of the spy stuff.
Mhm.
That implies that they have much greater power in this galactic marketplace than what we've really seen. They exist in the shadows to an extent, so that way they can continue to exist in the shadows for this part of the book anyway. Like, that's the relevant part, is there's more than what we know, but we don't know how much there is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of just throwing things out there that I'm kind of picking up from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like how what we've read is like kind of a world building in the context of like the Harkonnens and the Atreides. The next section will do more deeper dives into.
The Fremen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what about the opening scene of the book? The details of what were they called? Like the mothers, not the all
The Reverend Mother.
the Reverend
Reverend
Mothers.
Mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to
so
touch
yeah.
on the Reverend Mothers, because their
This
whole
seems-
Well, that's
their
like
whole thing
the
is
Bene
like
Gesserit.
eugenics, right?
yeah. So are they
Yeah,
like
that's-
altered though? Are they altered through spice? Like
Yeah. Where do their powers come from?
where do they come from?
because they're kind of like mystical, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of like
Well,
where
they
you
are
get, like,
mystical.
a fantasy magic sense in this series rather than just straight sci-fi.
Well, I think it's wrong to think of them as mystical.
Well, I mean, they're kind of mystical, but they also are just like hyper observant, and I think that's like kind of like half where their power comes from.
Well, yeah.
I get a sense of like a magic mystic thing when they're referred to. The two things I get that sense are the Reverend Mothers and the voice thing.
Yeah, the
Like
whole
that
thing.
whole voice.
It's like they're just
power that
commanding.
they
Like,
can
I'm just gonna
control.
tell you to do this, and you're gonna do it. Like I have the fucking force.
Sure,
Yeah.
but this is more of an unfamiliar technology, would seem like magic versus an understanding of what it is.
Well, I mean, is
So-
it really an unfamiliar technology? Because it seems like when
Yes.
Paul
terms of-
uses it, he just it's all about tone and pitch and all that stuff. Doesn't seem like there's
Right,
any
which is it's a
technology
very
involved.
controlled scientific process that Paul uses to replicate this. There is a pattern of behavior that he sees in a person and then knows to control his words in a specific tonal way because he has a greater understanding of the person. So the Bene Gesserit as a whole are like a shadow organization, basically. They work to control politics from the shadows, as well as they have their special breeding program. So there's like two parts to them. But basically, if you have a secret technology that would appear as magic to most people, and you're in internal sort of structure to it, is that you have minor contact with the public. Like, your goal is just to work through power. The people who work for power that aren't actually part of that power structure are only going to see them as witches because it's basically some sort of magic to them.
Speaking of technology or just items in general, the Chris knife, does that get more attention later on in the book? Because it seemed like it was a very
with the Fremen.
because it seemed like it was a very important item when it was introduced to Jessica.
Early in the book.
Yeah, I don't. This one is a lot more mystical because it's not like a special piece of technology. It's a sandworm's tooth that has been made into a dagger.
Yeah, but it seems like
so-
does it have some kind of like poison effect when used?
No, not inherently.
No?
When
Okay.
she was just given it, she had just suspected that when
Okay.
what was it the Mapes?
Mapes.
Shot up Mapes or whatever.
Yeah, when she brought it out, like Paul's mom was just expecting like, oh, is
she's
this
like
poison?
super
She's
defensive
just
because
super
they're in unknown
analyzing the
territory.
situation. So
Yeah.
I don't think that they are poison. I think she was just suspecting that maybe.
I wondered if they had some kind of like ability or mystical ability, just because of the fact that like they say that this can never leave the planet.
Yeah.
No,
and it has
I
to be,
wouldn't.
like in contact or close contact with the body, or it like
Yeah, so I thought maybe there was
Or
more to it
itself or
besides it
something.
just being like, oh no, it's just a very special blade.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a mystical item. I would sort of think of it in like a sort of a fantasy way of like how we've sort of fantasized about swords throughout history, both Eastern and Western history. Like in terms of like as weapons go, the sword is kind of a shit weapon. Like most armies are gonna be carrying spears. The sword's kind of a backup thing. But when you think of like what is the weapon of a knight, you're kind of thinking of their sword because mostly to have like a piece of steel like that, it requires a lot of money, so you have a lot of that wealth, and you would carry it around in civil situations where like normal people will see you, and
Mhm.
it's a symbol of power.
Yeah, and you're
And
not.
I
It's a
think,
lot easier to be walking around in public carrying a sword than it would be a spear or a halberd.
it's a defensive weapon, right? So
Yeah.
use it to defend rather
Yeah.
than to
yeah,
attack.
so
Right?
this weapon is a symbol of power, and when you have these symbols and you're people that depend on your superstitions, your prophecies, and things like
Mhm.
that, these things inherently gain more of a mystical property to them.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because it seemed like they seemed like it was painting it out to be more than what it was. And then it kind of just disappeared from the book. Like every now you'd see like, oh yeah, the Chris knife against her body. And then like that's it.
Yeah, I mean they'll talk more about it later, but
Okay.
if the sandworm is basically a god to you, having a piece of that god that only special people, that only Fremen can have,
Yeah.
um,
I
it's
think when it mentioned the knife in certain aspects of the book like that, I think it was just in those situations where they were trying to show that she's always this super hyper analyzed woman, looking at everything, making sure she's ready, knowing I have my weapon, knowing he may be dangerous. She's always analyzing the situation. And then it always just threw that in there. Hey, I still got this badass knife.
Okay. Um
So the Reverend Mothers,
yes,
because I don't think
Reverend
they're
Right.
technology based.
Well,
Well,
I
I
mean,
I disagree with that because I feel like their whole sense is like they are just maybe evolved.
sorceresses?
Like
Don't they have
they've
like
evolved and
precognitive powers?
I don't know
I
if
would,
well,
it's
I think that's just
precognitive.
them super analyzing
Yeah.
every little detail that they can almost
Well, I mean, speaking of precognitive powers, like maybe, maybe not, because when we get to the point where Paul figures out he's a mentat, but he's also
The
practicing
Benny.
Bene Gesserit stuff, he starts to like see a bunch of different forks that can go from that point and different futures that could possibly happen. And I'm guessing that's probably a combination of the training he's had as a mentat and the training he's had as Bene Gesserit.
I don't remember
yeah,
the mentat training.
I think
When did it
it's
mention in the book he was being trained as the
Well,
mentat?
so he at a certain point, his father comes to him and he's like, so
The beginning.
they're talking about mentats
yeah.
and how apparently mentats cannot be told they're being trained as mentats until a certain point, and then
I remember that.
after that point, it either goes one of two ways: either you go fucking insane or you continue with the training.
Yeah, or you just stop.
Yeah.
So like when Paul, so basically they're having this discussion about Thufir, Howard, I think is their mentat's name. Um, and so they're talking about how like yeah, Thufir Howard thinks you have a lot of potential to even become a mentat. And Paul's like, by golly, me? But I haven't even gone through the special training. You're
And
not
then
even
he
allowed to know
pauses.
about it.
He pauses like,
And then
oh
he's
no,
like,
wait, I
"Oh wait,
have,
the fuck? He's been training me my whole youth, and
and I
now
just
I'm
didn't
aware of
realize
it
it.
because yeah, I'm like I wasn't allowed to know, but now I know, and so I've actually been mentat training this whole
Yeah.
time." And it's like, well, hey, now do you want to continue the training, Paul? And it's like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna become Super Duke,
It
part
seemed
mentat,
like
part Duke.
Super Duke.
it seemed like there was a
Yeah,
little bit of a time jump then because it seems like his character
yeah. Well, the
evolves.
mention of it is still on.
Before they fly to Arrakis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
before
long?
they
How
come
long
to
is the flight to Arrakis? Like,
It-
what's the time
don't-
jump there?
Do they say?
I don't know if they mentioned the specific how long it takes to get from
The reason
planet
why
They
to
didn't
I
planet.
mention
asked,
anything about like sleeper cells or whatever, right? Like, oh, they were traveling through space. They didn't mention that, right?
your video is like just frozen. There, you're
Came
back
back
now.
there.
Yeah.
No.
But
That's
the
my
reason
voice
why I
trying to
asked,
shut me up.
yeah, the reason why I asked though is because, like, after the fact that he kind of gets that it's brought up that he's been trained as a mentat, it seems like his abilities evolve quite a bit, relatively quick.
Sure. So here's the thing.
Well, the question was like, is being informed, hey, you've been trained, you've been going through training as a mentat, is that some kind of trigger that might also just awaken things in someone?
Well, I think it's more of a theme of the transition from adolescence into adulthood that we're kind of getting throughout this whole beginning part of the book, where we're kind of referring to Paul as a child this whole time, but because he's now like being trained as a Bene Gesserit, and he went through the Gong Jabbar. He's like
Ganjabar is the box, right?
The Gong Jabbar is the poison needle. It's like a box of agony that causes pain.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about that, but let's finish what you were saying first.
Sure. So, like, the theme is that we're transitioning from this sort of like childhood state of Paul the kid to Paul the Duke's son, inheritor of sort of his name. And it seems like there's sort of a happy coincidence in our storytelling in between them going from the magical innocence, from Caladan to Dune, which was like the childhood forest planet, and now we're adulthood desert pain and suffering and survival.
Well, it was a drastic change because, like, from what I looked up the planet, and the planet's like almost a water world.
Yeah, they have sea power, and that's why they need to get desert power. So part of our theming in terms of that is like how surprised everybody is every time somebody does something special that requires water, because all of our fish out of water characters now that are on Dune are like, man, people seem to be really fucking confused anytime you do something.
Did he
with
just
water.
spit at me?
Yeah, and so it's everything's theme like kind of builds on itself.
So back to the box with the Bene Gesserits and the whatever that thing was called. I already forgot what it was called.
Box of Agony and the Gong Jabbar.
Gong Jabbar?
So the box itself, I forgot. Is it explained how that works?
No.
And why it causes pain?
It's just a black box. Just does a thing. Causes agony.
It does the thing.
Wait, was it black? I thought it was green.
I mean, black box in you don't know what's inside of it.
Okay. And then that poison needle thingy.
Yeah, is the Gong Jabbar. And it's sort of this, like human versus animal trope that they try and talk on a couple of times.
Yeah,
throughout the book.
Not all humans are like humans, right? If
basically, I think the test was, let's see if you have control of your fight or flight instinct.
Yeah, that's what it seems like they're trying to say. But it also sounds a lot like eugenics whenever they're talking about it and their special sort of breeding program.
Yeah.
Which can be sort of highly questionable.
It's like, let's just place all these concubines in different houses and make sure that they only have daughters.
So how does it work though? Like, is there some sort of hidden mechanism within the box, or is it just like if it's a mind over matter kind of situation that the Reverend Mother puts him in, does she have some sort of control over how it affects him? Like, how did the pain ensue? Was it all mental, and how did that come to be?
I'm sure it just activates every nerve ending in your hand to create sensations of pain, and then it adds like a variance mechanism to it, so that way the human mind just doesn't sort of blank it out.
Get used to it.
Like the mind that normally does.
And then the game is basically, do I pull away from this needle that's going to kill me if it punctures, or do I, by ripping my hand out of this box, or do I sit here until she's satisfied that I'm human?
Yeah. But lose my hand.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know what's going on. He thinks his hand's melting off.
Yeah, he might lose the hand for all we know.
Yeah.
Because an animal would chew off the limb.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like this weird question of like, who are the Bene Gesserit to determine, what is human? They have this idea of a trait that they're going for, because basically, they have a way of like looking internally at things, is what they sort of say, and they're looking for their opposite sex equivalent for what their power is. They have this like threshold that these women have a problem and they need a special man in their life to solve it, which becomes the Kwisatz Haderach.
Well, didn't I think they mentioned something about like the Kwisatz can like think like a woman but also think like a man or something like that?
I mean, without spoiling what's going to happen later, I don't know if I can.
Okay, yeah, then just we'll leave it at that because I haven't gotten that far.
What are you playing with, Chris?
That's the cap for his Hydro Flask.
Hydro Flask. See? This nerd gets it.
I have the same cap. But I choose Gatorade today.
I like it squishy.
Yeah, so they're kind of trying to build on this theme of like progression of humanity. Like we're given these powers that exist. So we're given the Bene Gesserit, we're given the Mentats, we're given the Spacing Guilds, we're given the Sardaukar, the elite fighting force of the Emperor, which all come from a special planet.
Do they go further into this Orange Catholic Bible?
Not really.
Okay, because like I'm just wondering, like, what is Orange Catholic? Is it actually in any way related to like actual Christian Catholicism, or is it just they're just bringing that word over?
The way I sort of remember it is like it's sort of like a belief structure that came out of humanity post Butlerian jihad. So they had a jihad, which was this holy war of
I
destroying.
know what a jihad is.
Of destroying computers in the shape of human minds. And so we're the people who were involved in that, like this belief structure that came post after that, is what the Orange Catholic Bible is.
Made you real angry, didn't it?
Dude, just the dead stare of pure hate.
Oh man!
Like it wasn't for you that I said that.
Oh, but it was just great. Oh, that was great.
So the Harkonnens,
Those bastards.
when they started taking over the castle, or to kill the Duke, and when all the ground laying has been laid, and they're starting to wipe him out and take over, what did you guys feel about their whole like military aspect? Like, what was their soldiers that are supposedly super hard?
Well, the soldiers that they had were like basically borrowed from the Emperor. Those were
From
the
the
super.
Emperor, yeah.
They have their own troops. They have their own army. They're a house. They're a baron family, so they're a noble family. They like the way feudal structure works is like as a lord, you maintain your own army's levies. Usually you're mostly using militia and a few corps of trained men, but basically they have their own army. And then because the emperor's part of this plot, to fuck over the Atreides, they've augmented this force with Sardaukar, which are this super elite commando force, basically, that are owned by the Emperor.
It's like the Emperor's special guard almost.
Yeah. I mean that's literally what it is. And so, like, in terms of taking over, like, this is like a planetary endeavor that all of these houses are engaging in, and so, like, I think this is like sort of one of the weaknesses of the books, is that it gets really hard to imagine the scale of what's happening. I think they try and extrapolate on it a little bit later because they're taking over like an Earth-sized planet. I think they said gravity was like a little bit higher than standard Earth gravity, if I remember correctly. So, like, if we're thinking in terms of the mass of a planet, it's going to be, it's about the size of Earth per se. And so you have this like changing of the guard. So there's all these kinds of things that would have to go into it. You have to traverse all kinds of territory and
Yeah,
sort of.
I thought that was weird because like you're pulling one guard completely out as opposed to like, all right, now you're working for them kind of thing. It's more like, all right, you're completely evacuating the planet and it's other crews coming in and taking over. I was like, that's a lot of logistical work.
Yeah, and I think the book just kind of skips that. Like it's we're told of the scale of these things, kind of, but then we just kind of move past it. We aren't given a sense of the scale.
They don't take a lot of time explaining the big things. Like I seem like the book progressed really, really quickly in this first section. Like,
Yeah.
hey, here's Paul. This is his dad. They reach the planet. They go out and look at the planet and see their first sandworm, and then boom, they're at a dinner table, and next thing they know, they're getting taken over by the Harkonnens. Like it was just one after another. And I thought it just progressed a little too quickly rather than explaining a lot of the interlaying details.
Yeah,
So-
but like, what are you going to talk about in between at the same time, right? Like, but since they don't do a good job telling you like how much time has passed, right? Like from when they leave the planet.
Well, I think it's
to
only like
practice.
they've only been on the planet for a week before the betrayal happens or something like
Yeah.
that, like a couple
So
weeks.
just as a little addition here, I looked it up because I got curious. Acceleration of gravity on Arrakis is 86 centimeters per second squared.
Yeah, you could just give us a multiplier. That would make more sense.
Well, Earth is, I think, 9.82 meters per second squared.
Fucking nerds, man.
Fucking
nerds, man.
I'm sitting there like, okay.
It's
Cool.
like he brought up the whole thing on it's like Earth.
Well, I thought Duncan said it was mostly like 1.05% like Earth gravity or something like that.
Well, that's what it says is the acceleration of gravity there.
Doesn't care. It doesn't matter. Fuck.
It does matter because we're trying to establish a sense of scale.
No, I mean,
Earth-sized planet.
Like just the sheer idea of pulling people out of a whole planet and then moving a whole group of people in its place.
Yeah.
For any planet, it could be something tiny as Mercury.
I mean, it's
still a huge
basically
scale, right?
it's basically a change of government, but on a planetary scale. As well.
Yeah, and that's like, imagine trying to do that in like Australia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
but I mean,
They were just like, tag, all right, you're up, bro.
Yeah, I was like-
I mean,
all right, we're gonna go
like-
occupy this planet.
Like just
Left that quickly,
remove
you arrived that quickly.
Parliament and install a Congress like the U.S. has.
I mean, I think it's more important than you want to say it is, because like, well, it's more important to me because it's one of those things that you think that I would think about, because like flying a plane, control it like in different atmospheric conditions, like you have to pay
like,
attention.
Duke Leto apparently is a really good pilot because he's piloted apparently back on his other planet, Caliban, whatever.
Waterworld.
Yeah, they had air power and sea power,
Waterworld.
And then all of a
water power or
sudden,
whatever.
like his
I like
first
it.
venture, his first venture out into this new world, and he's flying this Thopter thing, and he has no issue. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, but like air density is going to be different, gravitational pull is going to be different, all that stuff.
And all these are a lot of factors that get played into for just like regular everyday pilots.
Mhm.
I don't think they think about the gravity part as much. You can say nerd all you want, but it's definitely a thing that you think about when when the world is trying to make it feel real. There's all these like little details where like if you get caught on it, you're like, hey, wait a minute, what happens if we drill into this a little bit more? And I think that's kind of an issue of the book, is that we aren't given the sense of scale. Like another issue I have is like the betrayal part, Dr. Yui. We're told that like the reason why nobody's going to suspect him on the Atreides side is because he has this imperial conditioning.
Mhm.
And everybody knows it's impossible to betray anybody when you have imperial conditioning. But like, what the fuck is imperial conditioning?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
how do these people have like a sense of like a scale for what it is? Like how often do people get tortured and tested under this conditioning where they
Yeah.
just aren't capable of this behavior? But hey, we got your wife that you thought was dead.
Oh, I lost my imperial conditioning. Oh no.
Yeah, it's,
I mean,
it's this.
there are definitely others. Like, I totally get where you're getting like sense of scale because, right, it's like this universe and there's spacefaring like civilizations, but then like it doesn't feel very big. Like the universe feels very small and compact.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Well, yeah, it's all locked into this Arrakis thing, which in a lot of ways is fine because, like, what we're going to find out later is that the Arrakis is essentially the center of this galactic empire.
Mhm.
Without it,
Well, I
nothing would
mean-
run.
Well,
'Cause
yeah,
that's
because
spice.
the spice.
Yeah, I mean,
But that's
you
what
don't-
they're trying to do, right? Is stop that aspect. They don't want Arrakis to be the center of the universe, right? Well, I mean in terms of like in Paul's mindset. Sorry, like at the end of this chapter, like you get that sense that he wants to break down this whole sense of control from the imperial government.
yeah,
Well,
he
and the
doesn't
thing
want to
is-
be controlled.
Yeah, but also it seems like so. Going back to Leto seems like he really just wants to not just be a good leader, but also just like help the different people that he governs. Like he's actively trying to rescue people when that spice collector thing gets attacked.
Yeah, when the pickup wing
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and then at the dinner later on, and he's asking the guys like, "Hey, is it possible of like getting this place to flourish with like plant life and moisture and all that stuff so that people can survive without having to run around in still suits?" And like everyone's like, "That's impossible. And who gives a shit anyway? We're only here for the spice." And then like the planetary scientist guy, he's like playing it real cool and playing it subtle, and he's like, "No, yeah, maybe there's kind of a way of doing it." So it's almost like they just want to, like, the Empire wants to keep this planet in its kind of just
Controlled state where
controlled.
we
it's-
want spice.
we're only here just to mine
produce
this shit.
spice.
We don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
So-
So do you think? So you think that goes into why the Empire conspired
Well,
with
no,
the
no,
Harkonnens
I
to
thi-
take
I
the
think-
Atreides out?
Well, yes, but also I think that's also why Paul might be taking the side of the Fremen, is because like this is what he saw his father doing this at the dinner, and now he knows his father's dead, and he's like, well, I'm gonna take up his man. Like, well, one, he literally gets the ring,
The ring.
so like that's the mantle. He's just gotten the mantle now, but now he's also going to pursue it and finish what his father started,
Yeah.
From
or
a
was trying to.
so the Emperor intentionally wants to destroy the house of Atreides, right?
Yes,
Right.
Then why send him all the way over there to take over a whole planet to take over him?
Well,
just the logistical costs.
I think the reason why
and
is
the loss of
because
manufacturing of spice seems. a
Well,
little much.
remember when you're talking about the Atreides before they go to the planet Dune, they're like they're used to their planet. They have it fucking down to a T in terms of defenses. They have the water power, all that stuff.
So they're trying to displace them.
Exactly. They're putting them into a position of defense where they can, well, not a position of defense, but they're trying to put them into a least defensible position by moving them to another place.
Yeah, but
And-
I mean,
to move them to Arrakis, where spice needs to be manufactured and it's a huge part of its economy, but then you have to halt manufacturing and develop like all that stuff.
Like
for
there
the
wasn't
changing of the
another
guard.
planet they could
Yeah,
have just
like
been
would there
like,
be a
well,
better
go over
place
here.
that's less
Well, and at the
economical?
also
same
let's
time-
destroy
at the
that
same-
planet.
At the same
Yeah.
time, the Harkonnens were previously the ones governing that planet of Arrakis, right? So
So,
they-
but what Chris
they
is trying to say
have-
is, why not just leave the Harkonnens?
Yeah,
Okay.
And it's like,
They're already
hey, we want to
manufacturing,
kill,
they already
we
got
want to kill off
going on.
these people. So
Yeah,
why
like-
send them to our biggest moneymaker to then just
Yeah,
kill them
doesn't
off,
make any
s-
sense.
slowing production of spice.
yeah.
I'm just
Why
saying
send
from
them
from a
over here?
business standpoint. Yeah, from a business standpoint, it just doesn't make much sense. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there's better ways to kill people than like destroy parts of your industry.
Sure. So the one thing that you're forgetting is that they mentioned is, hey, so they're doing this. It's like, why would they do this? Because these chum profits are what they're hungry about. Like we're gonna get the seat at this chum table. So they said that both the Harkonnens and the Emperor have been stocking up on spice for years. So
Mhm.
they have this stockpile. So what happens if you have a large amount of supply and demand, and then or like you've built up a large pile of supply, right?
Mhm.
And you still have the current supply demand scale, but all of a sudden you're about to strip away that supply.
Same thing with, isn't that the same concept of the whole Zales diamond business? They have a
Yeah,
stockpile of
Yeah.
diamonds and they control
the
the
Diamond
actual,
Cartel.
Yeah.
Fuck, I can't remember their name right now. They're not
I know what you're
important.
talking about. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
I probably missed that or forgot that or was doing something while
so,
you mentioned
but
that.
yeah, so they're sitting on it. So they have this way of making like they're not going to run out of spice, and they've determined that the Atreides they haven't explained yet why the Atreides are really a problem right now. They get more into that a little bit later. Maybe it's in another book.
Okay, so that's
Um,
the other question is like, why are the Atreides a problem if they have a planet that's like functioning correctly? Like, it just doesn't. I don't understand the motive to destroy a whole house of people.
Well, that's why you have to read the entire saga. Apparently,
Yeah,
we
but
all
as a new
decided we're not
reader,
going to.
as a
Yeah,
as a new
Yes.
reader, when you start this book
As
and
a
you're
person
like, I
coming
just don't
in.
understand why
Yeah.
you would want to, like,
this goes back to what you guys were kind of talking about a little bit ago, which is noblesse oblige, which is those who rule and sort of how they affect those that they rule. So where we see the way that the Harkonnens rule, they basically rule through fear and an iron fist, while the Atreides are able to rule basically with consent of their people. They're, you know, they absolutely love their Duke. All the people that we meet, they fight and die for this Duke.
Leto
Everybody
made it a
else,
point of like introducing someone to the Fremen before even
Mhm.
arriving there, so they can get an
Yeah.
idea of like how their society works, and just be friendly with them.
So maybe
Right.
the Empire is just scared that people will be more loyal to the Atreides house. And
Well,
in
that's
turn,
that's what I
mean,
was alluding to earlier about like is the Emperor afraid of this house because they're gaining popularity and like they might be able to take control of the
Overthrow.
yeah,
Empire?
they kind of hint at it at the beginning of the book. Like the Atreides house has been really successful recently. Like they're just outperforming everybody else. I think that they've been kind of bloodying the nose of the Harkonnens throughout this point in history. Um, and so as you see that, like I think a Duke house is just below like a kingship in traditional medieval structure. So this is a legitimate rival. One of the things that they don't really discuss um, in this early part of the book, though, that I will spoil, is that the emperor doesn't have a male heir at the time. At this time,
So Duke is just below Prince, by the way.
yeah, but I mean, a prince is an
Well,
inheritor,
no,
is a direct inheritor.
well, yeah, but it goes King, Prince, Duke.
Who cares?
thank you.
Just, I mean, he mentioned it, so I looked it up. Just wanted to throw it in there. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but a prince is like a direct inheritor and is part of
Yeah.
the same family. I'm saying that as close to a social equal as there could be to a king, you're going to run into a duke house. Jesus fucking Christ, dude.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, who cares? Like, we all understood what he was saying. Why you gotta?
But
Like,
I wanted to know what the actual rank. I wanted to know specifically if it was actually like right
Yeah,
below
Chris.
or not.
Great, but did you have to
Talk about
interrupt me mid fucking thought?
Yeah, I
don't
love
know.
doing it to you.
Jesus.
I don't remember where I was going. But basically, yeah, I mean,
So they get the Atreides in there. They conspire with the Harkonnens to kill them.
Mhm.
I have a question. Weren't any other houses like if they weren't like, oh yeah, the Atreides are great people? How come none of them were just like, yo, that was fucked up?
Yeah, they
Well,
don't mention
I
the
mean,
other
It's
houses
probably
too
a
much.
fear thing.
they
Probably like,
talked
oh,
about
shit.
it a little bit. Like they said, like all these houses, Gus, and they would be in favor with us, but it's still an emperor. He has this sword over everybody's head that is his Imperial Sardaukar legions that are the super elite special forces troop kind of thing. Like it's
So the Emperor himself is just like the Harkonnens. They
He's
rule
Palpatine.
over fear, manipulation, and fear.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we're contrasted with is, our
Yeah.
antagonists versus, what we're told are good people.
That's exciting.
Still,
So
on
are
a
they gonna
business
go-
standpoint,
do they ever go into the whole thing of like why laser guns and shields make a very bad thing?
I don't think they explain it. Well, I mean, they do explain it. Sometimes when a laser gun hits a shield, it causes a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, but it's
They,
like damn.
no, I don't think that they ever break down the particle physics to tell us why that happens. Because
we should do that.
Because no one cares about the particle physics. Why
yeah,
that happens.
I mean,
I just want to hear. I just want to hear. Hey, this is fucking dangerous. Okay, cool.
His video froze again.
a little
I
bit
mean-
for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, like right, this is sci-fi and it's like not real life, so it's not
Yeah, you
hard.
just
to
gotta,
sci-fi,
you
so,
got to
like,
take it for the fantasy, and it is.
the escapism.
Yeah, I'm just
of it
curious
all.
if it goes further into it. Is all.
Yeah.
Well, it goes into it in the sense that it causes a nuclear explosion. I don't think that you
Well,
should
it doesn't.
undermine that.
It doesn't cause a nuclear explosion. It causes as much damage, but there's no radioactive fallout after the fact.
Well, I mean, so a laser is a type of radiation that is emitted as a light source. So it is like it is, for all intents and purposes, we're just going to call it a nuclear explosion at this
I was
point.
fine with that. Yeah.
Big bada boom.
Bada boom.
Oh my god.
Getting into the weeds here, boys. Getting into the
Yeah.
weeds.
That is sort of like a thing that seems weird to get around. Just so like everybody has these personal shields on them. So like we see this like weird importance of like hand to hand combat. So like
Mhm.
people are stabbing each other at night. So like if you can't use a laser gun and you eventually are trying to like just wear down somebody's shields with melee combat, why wouldn't just like a LMG that's just constantly firing at somebody's shield eventually break through?
It's a good point. Yeah.
And like, here's a question:
Maybe they've just
if
moved
if
away
they
from
can,
the
if they can
background.
cause such a dramatic reaction, say, these phase guns hits a shield. There's never been a time where like there's been a fight going on and a guy was like, "Oh shit, I just sprayed and prayed and
Accidentally.
hit 4 guys with shields." Like, that's the first thing I thought about. Like, I wonder how many accidents would happen.
They try and like hand wave that a little bit to not making it as much of an issue in saying that laser guns are very expensive. So
So
like they're
use them that often.
yeah, as well as they're likely to cause nuclear explosions. And they feel like they're trying to they say like they mentioned the house atomics or whatever. And so it feels like they're and like how other like they can't use atomics because they don't want to be so
They don't want the radioactive fallout.
no, not the fallout. They don't like you can trace nuclear explosions like to
Oh,
the
yeah,
source
yeah.
of the plutonium, that kind of thing. They don't want their fingerprints attached to
Yeah.
these murder devices.
Okay.
And so I think the story's internal logic is that there's still like a kind of chivalry that exists within the story where like nuclear explosions are bad and people will try and avoid it even if they're trying to commit like mass genocide on a house of people. So like it kind of maintains its own logic that way.
I did notice that a lot of the talk about like personal weapons were these shield generators, and then do they all just have like a type of dagger? Like,
Yeah, that's part of the Atreides fighting style.
Yeah, it's like is it always a dagger or are there ever swords?
I think they
there was the rapier. They mentioned
well, they have Kinjal. They
rapier,
call
yeah.
it Kinjal. I don't know the exact specs of a Kinjal, but that's sort of like the Atreides fighting style. Is they have this Kinjal with their shields. That's sort of like
Mhm.
their thing. Versus the Fremen who have their crisp blades. And I
Which
think they're all
dagger.
yeah, I think they're all like designed to be one-handed weapons.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of this.
if we use the production stills for the new Dune movie as anything, it looks like all the Atreides when they're in their like uniform, they all seem to have like a specific type of dagger on their belt.
Yeah, I think that's the Kinjal.
Yeah.
So, because I think the original idea is that you're like looking for weaknesses in people's shields that you then slip a dagger into once you're able to
Yeah.
find it. And that's sort of like where the fighting exists.
And maybe they're just more comfortable getting like within someone's defenses just to get that kill shot.
Yeah, I mean that's what we saw between Paul and Thufir
Was
Howard.
Was it Duncan or was it Howard?
How?
I'm pretty sure he was fighting the Mentat. He was
Speaking
sparring
of-
with him.
Speaking of names here, like there are some odd names and there's like just normal names like Duncan
Paul Duncan.
Idaho.
Oh, yeah. Paul Atreides. Yeah, it's
Jessica, like just normal names, and then you got like some really weird ones.
Yui.
Howard. I
Hey, I'm
think
Paul. I'm Yui.
Well, Yui. Well, I think Yui's supposed to be like specifically like an Asian type character.
Whoa.
What?
Whoa. That's
Well, I mean-
crazy.
That's some rude ass speculation.
listen, just because he's a doctor, that is some racist
Yeah.
shit there, Andy.
Well, also the guy they cast for it is Asian guy.
I mean, maybe that's what they're. I don't know if that was Frank Herbert's whole thing. I don't know what he's going for there. I think the idea maybe he might have been going for is we get this wide variety of names because we see Duke build a wide coalition of people that he's able to get together because he works with them and he doesn't make them necessarily work for him.
He's a man of the people.
Yeah.
So the Fremen and the ways of the water,
Them blue-eyed fucks.
blue-eyed fucks. I really like their. I wouldn't say like tribalistic laws, but like the holy ways and the way they tiptoe about their laws on water. You know, like your water is our water.
Well, I mean, water's so precious in
Yeah.
Arrakis, right?
Like
so
they live in the desert. They don't have the money
Yeah.
to just like
they built this
get
like
water. Yeah.
religion or way of life around it, so everything is based on it, right? Like
It was-
your blood is like your body's water kind of thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they do a good job selling the importance of it. Like
The scene where
that
the
planet.
guy spits on the
Yeah.
table, like just going to show like just how precious it is to them. Like I'm gonna give you this much of my body's water.
Yeah, I
show
really
them.
liked the building of the Fremen and their people. I thought that was
I do think
the
that's where
coolest
this
aspect of the book for me.
I do think that's where this story excels. Is it's really sort of hinging on an idea of like what's something that feels very mundane
mhm.
to us, and what if we make that super scarce? Like, and then we kind of make them a superstitious people. Like, it feels very real the way a culture can warp around the scarcity of an item.
Yeah, it does a really good job of that. I was like, that's pretty cool.
It was Duncan, Idaho that the Duke sent to go live with them?
I
Yeah,
believe
dual,
so.
Yeah,
Was it?
the Duncan. Yeah.
The Duncan.
Mr. Idaho. Does he die in the beginning of the first part?
So
Whoa.
far in the first part, he seems to be alive.
Okay.
Spoilers. Let's not get any weirdness.
Didn't
I
we
don't
just
remember.
fucking
I
say that
honestly
we're
don't
gonna have
remember.
spoilers when we started?
Yeah,
Listen,
but we
do you
haven't,
guys-
broken to that. part of
Spoilers
the-
for the part of.
I
the
was
book that we-
asking if he died because I'm not there yet. So I
thought
you
can't
read this
remember if he had died in this first section. And
Why
I
are you
just
trying to spoil it for
remember.
yourself?
I thought you read this before.
Years ago. Years
yeah, I
ago.
can't remember. I've read it before.
Do you guys want like a spoiler from the fourth book?
No.
Okay.
So the Thopters.
Yeah.
I guess would that go into like desert technologies that are around?
It's a
about the
helicopter, right?
copters. Yeah.
Is it like a helicopter?
Well, I mean, it kind of gives you the idea of it is, but like I think
But
they
then it
mentioned
has,
that
like,
there's
the wings
there's
flapping.
flapping and shit. So
It
Yeah, I
mentions-
think
and
I think
redrawing them
Thopters-
to like certain degrees and stuff like that before they fly.
Well, I think
So-
I think a thopter is defined as like a flying vehicle with wings that actually are
Flap.
the thing that flap and that to provide lift. Versus like you have fixed wing craft, like airplanes, and then like spinning wing craft, which are like helicopters,
called rotary craft.
rotary craft. Yeah. And so I think a thopter is defined as a device that like flaps its wings to provide lift.
Well, but Nate, you mentioned something about at a certain point they can actually fix the angle of the wing and keep it. locked
Yeah.
in
So when
place.
they're rescuing those guys out in the desert,
Mhm.
it mentions it 2 or 3 times. Like, or Paul mentions it in his internal monologue when he's just like reviewing what his dad's doing in this situation, And his dad's like, they're retracting wings, they're putting them at certain angles to provide for being able to carry a heavier capacity and stuff like that. And I just really liked that scene.
I imagine it probably functions something like a tilt rotor aircraft.
Yeah.
Like the ones that they start off with, like a rotary craft, and then they slowly tilt the engines, and then they go to a fixed wing aircraft.
I see a lot of symbology in the way he was describing. Kind of like in a third party, I get the sense that the Thopters are kind of
Did
like
you
these
just say
birds.
symbology?
Symbolism. I don't know what the fuck.
Because as soon as you said symbology, all I'm thinking of is Boondock Saints.
Symbology. But I see a lot of symbolism of like the Thopter being like something like a bird, and then when they come up on the big desert miner, Paul mentions that it looks like a beetle. So it's like a lot of their technologies are have these similarities to different animals.
I mean, I think there's a lot that we see in engineering that, like, if you go and look at the natural world, you'll see a lot of similarities between the two. I think that's something
I just
that
liked it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like, it's one of those
It gave
things
it,
where
like,
it's
this old aspect. Like, it's so many years into the future, but everything is super simple. And so, like, what are they creating things based off of? And it's like, well, people are still creating things based off of things in the world. And I liked that.
I mean, they don't even have Alexa anymore, so
Alexa,
spice the mind.
they don't have that
mind the
anymore.
spice.
So.
Speaking of the scene where the Thopter lands,
Shut up, Burger.
Speaking of the scene where the Thopter lands, where they can rescue the people in the miner thing, it all seems like those guys that are doing the mining, like they really want to stay as opposed to escape right away,
because they think they're going to get out. They're like,
but like they already know that their other craft is gone because they've been alerted, but they're still kind of dragging their heels for a little bit, and it makes me wonder, is like, are they so like used to being expendable or being treated as completely entirely expendable by the
were they Fremen, the mining crew?
No,
there were a couple Fremen that were hanging out with them.
Yeah, like
but there was
the two that ran away once the thing was destroyed, right?
Yeah.
But
the thing is, they weren't supposed to know they were Fremen. Because when Paul mentions it, he's like, "Those guys were Fremen." They're like, "How the fuck did you know that?"
Yeah, because
so who were the mining crew? What were their people? Because
I mean, they're worksmen.
Are they indentured? Right? Are they indentured servitude, or are they like actually making anything out of it?
I mean, we hear the Luke offering to pay double wages of what the Harkonnens paid.
Yeah.
And
there's also the bonus for whoever spotted the worm.
So it doesn't mention like that they're from a specific house. They've just been on the planet.
No, they're part of like they're workers. They do their own thing.
Maybe they're part of the mining guild or something.
They're trained labor.
In that sense, then that kind of shortens up like the whole planetary transition of the two houses, because there's many aspects then that are guys. We stay on the planet and we mine. Whatever house rules over us tells us what to do. Doesn't matter to us. We're just here to work.
I mean, they probably have enough skills where they can take that anywhere. So if like, hey, guys, I know that you want to keep mining spice, but we think shit's gonna hit the fan. Let's get off world and go work somewhere else for a little bit until shit calms down. It seems like they have that option. They aren't stuck there, so they have to go out and recruit labor. So they offer better wages, better working conditions, all that kind of stuff. I don't think.
I mean, really, would they be able to find work elsewhere, considering this Dune is the only planet with the spice? So like that's their practice.
Yeah, but manual labor is manual labor.
Yeah, unless it's
not even, and it's operating heavy machinery. Like if you have a license to drive a tractor.
So what you're saying is that the premise of the movie Armageddon is completely sound. Just take these oil drillers and send them to space because they know how to drill.
Wouldn't it make more sense just to teach NASA pilots how to mine?
Involved. Anything is possible.
I just wanted to bring that reference of Armageddon.
What was the when they left to go out to the desert, and before they left to go out to the desert, when they were getting their still suits, I liked the prophecy bases that. What was the old character that was like going to show the Duke the desert and everything? What was his name? The Fremen guy.
I can't remember his name. He was only in that one part of the book.
Yeah.
Well, he was in two parts. He was at the dinner too.
Yeah.
The
Stilgar?
no,
Every
What?
time he notices,
Stilgar?
no, Stilgar's the leader of the Fremen.
The
He's
leader of
talking
the
about
Fremen.
the monitor of the change or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the keeper of the change.
The one who spits on the table.
I don't remember.
Oh, well, that's Stilgar.
That's
He's the
Stilgar.
one who
Yeah.
spits on the
Still got-
table.
Okay.
That's not the guy who they
who
talked
like
to.
infected Paul and was like, "How do you know the ways of the desert? Have you
Yeah,
wanted still
that's the
before?"
Oh, the
the
planetary scientist.
Yeah, the planetary ecologist or whatever they call him.
Yeah.
But he's a Fremen, right?
No, but
he
he like lives like them.
yeah,
Hmm.
he's
Okay, I got the sense he was a Fremen, but he didn't live with them. He was there to help the Atreides
very
learn the
close.
ways of the Fremen.
He's very close to them. So, like, I guess he's kind of serving the same aspect as was it Duncan that he sent
Duncan,
to head of-
Idaho, yeah.
Yeah, he's serving the same purpose.
yeah, I think
that-
they said he's a friend of the CHs, as well. Like I think he's been to them, but I don't know if he's like a native Fremen or anything like that. I don't believe so.
Yeah, they didn't mention anything about blue eyes with him, so I think he's just a regular human, regular vanilla human.
Yeah, I mean, so that's sort of like a theme of this sort of opening section is with the Bene Gesserit, like if we want to go back to them for a second, is that they sort of control governance. Like that's sort of one of the things that they describe early. So we see like as an integrally woven sort of sect of this empire, they've stretched out legs everywhere where they've built up all these superstitions of the Reverend Mother. I'm forgetting all the fancy Fremen words for it now, as well as Muad'Dib in terms of these superstitions that they want to in place on the planet. And so it's cool that like as we get further into it, we kind of see that like one of these powers of the Mentats is to kind of be able to like envision / predict the future, sort of see what's going to happen. So there's sort of this like we're kind of given this like math ability of the Mentats / Bene Gesserit people where they can kind of predict what's going to happen and like where they can see the future. And then we see Paul who can see the future. So he's able to like put on a still suit mostly correctly. And then that reinforces the belief, superstition that Bene Gesserit's put in place. That there's going to be a chosen one who knows all your cult customs and things like that, even though he's an outsider. And it's sort of like this sort of like the future predicts the past. That I think is kind of cool. Like there's a lot of like sort of like actual physics that exists there that kind of says a lot of similar stuff there.
Is there so the whole thing with the Bene Gesserit and controlling kind of like also genetics and all that, but the concubines that they send out, like they usually don't know what their parentage is, but like it seems like the higher ups in the Bene Gesserit do know. And does that come into play later on in terms of like trying to join houses, without them really knowing and stuff like that?
Well, what you kind of find out is that the Bene Gesserits like keep a secret ledger. Like they know that they're doing their eugenics thing, and they have dominant traits and submissive traits that they want to bring out in people. So they keep records of it. It isn't so much that everybody doesn't know their parentage, so much as like if it's not important for you to know, and we don't want you to know, you're not going to know. Like they're not. If it's important for you to know, they'll tell you. Like it's not. It's one of those things where it's like, in terms of being able to control power structures in government, they're going to use these things in their favor.
So it's almost like the Reverend Mothers behind the scenes are technically manipulating everything. Whilst not in total control, they have a lot of control.
Well, I mean, they mention it like right in the beginning of the book. It's like Bene Gesserit, their business is controlling politics. Spacey is controlling interstellar travel.
And the Mentats are like, advisors because they're able to do all these calculations and do all that kind of stuff. So you build these sort of three pillars of society, which three is the minimum number to create a stable like object, as well as it's a holy number throughout like a lot of historical writing, and so it's interesting that we have these things,
It's a prime
and
number.
yeah, so we can uh like it's interesting to see the way like Frank Herbert has taken like like even if it wasn't intentional, like you have this three, um that it works. Like we it feels believable because of how often we see three pop up in a lot of our lives.
So has anybody read into the next portion of the book at all?
No,
No, I
it's
stopped.
next episode.
Okay.
Jesus.
I was just asking.
I mean, I
Where does
read
this
the
one
first.
this one technically ends on what was the guy who was trying to make like almost like a water pact with the leader of the Fremen? What was his
I'm
name?
pretty sure that's the planetary scientist guy.
Stilgar and Duncan, Idaho. But no,
At
that's
the-
not where it ends. It ends with Paul realizing he can see the future now,
Mhm.
and they're going to go join the Fremen.
Yeah, like, and he sees like,
And,
like
like,
it could either
what
end
Christ
in
does to him and
This,
stuff like
this
that.
is when it starts, explaining
yeah, and they start talking
he
about
can't really
jihad
feel
or
anymore. And
potential
he sees all
jihad.
these different paths,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where it ends.
So that's kind of where we stopped.
So, what was your favorite aspects of the books, or the book, one by one?
like, I feel like I can't really say yet if I have a favorite part, just because a lot of it so far has just been world building, and then it like really quickly jumps into high gear in terms of the whole betrayal part, takeover, and then this
Yeah, it's
kid
just
Paul, and then Paul's just realizing, oh shit, I'm special. So
like right
like,
off the bat,
yeah,
and he
like
thinks he's a monster because of it too.
yeah.
Like I liked
And
his internal battle with himself.
yeah,
Like
he's like
what
I
am
should
I?
feel sad because my dad just died, but I don't, because I'm
He's
just
an
thinking
asshole.
everything with logic and numbers. So I'm pretty sure that there will be a part that I find to be my favorite, but so far I haven't really found anything that I can say, yeah, this is my favorite part.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite part at all. Like, it's just world building and like
Well, I mean,
setting-
I guess what was
like
your
I like the
favorite
world
aspect
building. Like,
of
I like
this
that.
of this
Do you
world
have a
building?
favorite part of the world building? Was there a trick that the author used where you're like, hot damn, that's a hot
I
that's
think
a
it's
hot
just
tool
more
that
of
you
like
did?
it's more of like everything we've talked about, like between the Bene Gesserit and then how the I guess the Empire operates, and then like just the politics behind everything. I think it's I just want to know more about that stuff, right? Like
Yeah,
about the
I-
eugenics, and then how the mentats play and what the eugenics associated to mentats
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
I really would
Please
like
talk
to
to
see
me more about eugenics.
Yeah.
I really just want to know more about like the background of the Bene Gesserit, and just figure out like how they learned all these abilities, and like what is really the basis of them, etc.
would there be like
What's the
some
science
sort of-
behind the magic?
what's the science
Yeah.
behind it? Like, is it
Is it
faith
science?
driven?
Is it science, or is it
driven?
magic?
Yeah. And I'm okay with either or, to be honest. Like,
Yeah, I just want to know which one is it.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Burger?
I think it's more of the world building and like these different like political stuff that goes on. That's
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Honestly,
but the
though,
characters themselves aren't really like that. Like,
They don't
super
have-
compelling for me. Like,
Yeah.
I like the Duke.
the Duke's a
but
cool guy, and then
Who doesn't like Ned Stark?
Duke's cool.
Right? So
Exactly. But the
I think
entire
Baron
time,
Harkonnen is a really good, just like bastard kind of a person.
Yeah,
Like
he's a good villain.
antagonist.
is
Yeah.
he Ramsay?
Villain.
Chris, would you say he's like a Ramsay Snow, or is he not that hateable?
No.
Fry him
I don't think he's like a Ramsey, but he's like just like a solid villain, right?
Yeah.
So I like these two characters. Paul, I am like indifferent about. I'm sure
like-
it'll change when
Yeah.
you get into the next portion where you like really. It's more about him as opposed to like. So this book, part of the book is like more about just like setting everything up for Paul, essentially.
Yeah. One thing that I was a little disappointed in is that like the Dr. Yui who betrayed the Atreides people, I kind of wanted his plan of killing the Baron to have come to fruition instead of the Baron surviving that attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Yeah.
like, because, I mean, it goes into mention about, like, you know, his nephew, who he has him sitting in on meetings and, like, learning everything. I figured, like, okay, maybe he does get one in on the Baron. Baron goes down, and then, like, the nephew comes in.
Nephew
Like,
rises.
motherfucker. Yeah. Because,
I do think it would be.
Because, I mean, you
Because-
have Paul replacing his dad, and then why can't it happen also on the antagonist side of things?
Yeah, I think it would be cool to see them sort of die on each other's swords.
Mhm.
You know, the way their sort of greed and hatred could kill each other. If I had to pick like a favorite thing in the sort of beginning section of the book, I do think like in terms of what was done, I think the best aspect of what I like, which is like being able to create something that feels real, is probably the litany against fear in the early part of the book. Like having this sort of very chantable sort of mantra. It feels like a thing that actually exists within its world. It isn't like doesn't feel artificial. Like having spoken word, like actual things that people sort of rest on, is it's very powerful the way like people feel those things, whether or not they actually have any sort of real power, um, and it's something that you can like. It feels tangible to you as a reader. Like you don't question whether or not this thing would actually exist.
Personally, I just like the world building of the Fremen, like their whole
Yeah, I'm looking
bylaws.
forward to.
Their
I'm looking
their
forward to the
whole
Fremen.
honor. They're very honorable people. You know, I don't know. I just like the Fremen.
Are they so? Just small spoiler, if you want to give it to me or not. Are they kind of like a warrior people?
That's what I get the sense.
I mean, they
Because
say
they're
that
almost
they're
like,
a warrior people.
Yeah,
They've
but
been
like you
fighting the
don't really
Harkonnens
see
the
it.
whole time.
So like, are
What do you
they?
mean? They've been. They say that the Fremen caused the Harkonnens nothing but trouble.
So would you say they're more like Klingons or more like
I feel like
I
they're
would
more
say
like
that-
survivors
just
more than
survivors?
anything else.
I
Not
would say that they're
necessarily-
the Fremen.
Yeah. Like they're just people surviving and then fighting, right? Like and
They're
that's
on a
part of
planet.
surviving,
they learned that planet to live.
right? They're the natives of the planet, and then you
Yeah.
got the
They're the
Harkonnens
local
and
tribe.
I'm just trying to
Atreides
see
or-
if there's like another, you know, another kind of culture that you can compare them
don't-
to.
They aren't a culture that thrives on conflict. They're a culture. We'll get more into sort of their goal in the next section. Like their goal is to essentially not constantly struggle for water, basically, which was kind of hinted at in the early part of the book by the
Mhm.
planetary ecologists.
Mhm.
And so it gets a lot deeper into like sort of how they're working on this goal, because it is something that they're actually doing.
Okay.
So like instead of thinking of like Klingons in terms of people who are like constantly aggressive with each other, something like that, they are people whose goal is to stay alive.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to double check because, like, you know, there's that mention of jihad, so that it seems like they're really super aggressive if they're going to go on a jihad type thing, but then also they're not really portrayed that way so far.
Yeah,
then
I mean
again-
that's a sort of like an interesting thing about what Frank or what Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now I'm messing up his name. Chooses with a lot of his language, like you were mentioning earlier, that all these names, like some of them are super normal, like Duncan, Idaho, and then like we get like an Orange Catholic Bible, but then we get like this distinctly jihad, sort of like this sort of like different powerful word from a different group, and it sort of carries the full weight from a societal context that we use today. Like we it's a very big word to choose. Like why specifically choose this word versus
Yeah.
saying
Also,
Holy War?
the time period that it was written in as well. Like you said, it's from the 60s.
64, I think, is when the book was first released. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, 1964.
All right. Anybody else want to add anything else into the conversation? Burger?
Fear is the mind killer.
Okay. Nate? Nothing?
I liked the way in the poison scene specifically. I like the way that they instilled that the Baron was kind of this big, strong, I'm in control, I'm a badass, but he's quick to fear. You know,
He's also, well, I mean, I don't know if I would consider him strong so much as just a fat piece of shit.
Yeah,
Well-
his fat's held up by suspensors. I don't
Yeah.
think it's. He's more of a person who wants to wield power,
Yeah.
like a cudgel, than a person
Yeah.
who uses it as a tool to create things. And
Mhm.
so we sort of get a portrayal of the way two different men use power.
I thought
Yeah.
poisons would play a bigger role so far, just considering how much they spoke about them early in the book.
yeah, the whole
I think that's
time they were
And then they
mentioned.
had
I
the
think-
hunter killer in the beginning
And
of the
the
book.
poison sifters and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of this. Like, we're using a lot of medieval terminology in describing things. So, like, in terms of like how we think about subterfuge would have worked in sort of that medieval way. How do you overcome poisons in the future? And sort of like how what instead of having a food tester kind of thing, he's like, oh, this is really clever. We'll have something that just detects poison above where people eat. And this is that sort of invented technology.
All right. So at this point, just as a kind of closing for the episode, at this point, Paul and his mom have basically escaped the whole massacre of their house. They're out in the desert. They're looking for the Fremen. Paul is realizing that he's actually a very special person. And we'll see where it goes from there.
We're all
He's an
special.
he's an abomination though.
Druggy.
Yeah. He's now
Cricket.
addicted. He's now addicted.
All right, boys.
He's getting more of that sweet spice in his life.
All right. Well,
He's-
in next episode we'll finish everything off. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah, we should.
Well, I don't
there's
know.
only
Remember, we're in
12 hours
part one
left
of 3 parts, so I don't know how dense part 2 is.
It's
We'll
the other
finish
half
the
of the
book from
book.
here. Yeah,
Dense like bread.
we're basically halfway through. You guys said
Yeah.
that you were able to get through it pretty easily. It would only be like an extra 2.5 hours of reading. I don't think that we'll have an issue with just finishing the book from here.
Yeah. We'll finish the book. It's fine.
Yeah, because I just wasn't sure if the next part of the book was going to be like super fast paced, so it's just throwing a lot at you in a very short period of time. And that's enough
They
to
kind
dissect.
of they kind of sit with Paul and the Fremen for a little bit,
Mhm.
and then they hit a point, and like
Yeah.
so like from here to Paul and the Fremen, it's kind of slow. There's a lot of like things that happen in this like little section, and then it goes 0 to 100 real quick, and then it
Very
kind of
quick. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and end it there, and
All right.
we'll catch everyone next time.